Hello and welcome to this podcast from the BBC World Service. Please let us know what you think and tell other people about us on social media.
This is Crowd Science from the BBC World Service, and this is the show that goes that extra mile to answer your science questions, which is why I'm on my hands and knees with my bottom in the air, and all I can say is I'm glad this is audio only. Welcome to yoga class, where I'm being put through my paces because Margaret in North America has a question.
I am Margaret from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and my question is, when I am in yoga classes and the instructors say things like, this position or this move is good for your digestion or good for blood flow to your head, or this is a detox. I'm like, seriously? Really? What's the truth on that?
That is a good question. Are you a yoga bunny? Are you regularly doing yoga?
Yeah, I've been doing yoga for probably closing into about 15 years.
Nice. Oh, so you're obviously getting something from it.
Yeah, it keeps me flexible. Yeah, and strength.
I started doing yoga via an app in the bathroom. It's part of why I loved your question was there are just pauses when you're holding a pose. Then the woman in her special soft yoga voice does say something like, this stretch is great for opening up the muscles of the lower back and increasing blood flow to the head. And you're like, that could be anything.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, Margaret. Some, like Margaret, feel yoga is good for their body. Others are more interested in how it calms the mind. For some, this is a deeply spiritual activity and a way of life. According to one source, 300 million people around the world regularly do some form of yoga, and it has all sorts of claimed benefits. Here's just a selection we found online, with the usual warnings not to automatically trust anything you find on the internet.
One of the most significant health benefits of yoga is that your immune system will improve and get stronger. Yoga helps to reduce your blood pressure.
In this short video, I'm going to share with you my best yin yoga poses for constipation.
Today I'm going to demonstrate for you some simple asanas that are excellent for combating low blood pressure.
This posture is specifically designed to increase the capacity of the lungs and flushes out all the toxins from the abdominal organs, leading to burning of fat all over the body.
If you had one too many the night before, doing yoga in the morning is a great way to cure your hangover.
You've just heard claims about everything from removal of toxins to constipation cures. So exactly what is the evidence, who's finding it and how? Crowd Science has brought together a panel of global yoga experts to discuss this. So let's meet them now. Panel, could I ask you to introduce yourself, where you're from and maybe the aspect of yoga you find most intriguing? Where should we start? Should we start in India?
So I'm Rajvi Mehta. By training, I am a reproductive biologist. So I am a scientist and a practitioner of yoga.
Holger, you next.
Yes, hi. I'm Holger Kramer. I'm Professor of Research in Complementary Medicine at the Department of General Practice and Interprofessional Care at the University of Tübingen.
And our final yoga expert is Dr. Richard Davidson. Whereabouts are you?
I am at the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the United States. I am a neuroscientist by training.
OK, thank you, panel, and welcome to Crowd Science. I should tell our listeners that as part of this episode, I've been off to do some yoga to push my body into different shapes and to see what difference that makes. So let's hear part of that now.
Mountain pose. Mountain pose is a basic standing pose. Stand with your feet together.
Yep.
Pull in your abdominals.
Yep.
Relax your shoulders and gently rock back and forth. Coming to rest.
This is quite a lot of instructions, but this is basically just standing. I think I can do this.
As you've just heard there, an easy pose to start with, but something different to just standing up. And I think at this point we should be defining some terms, because what even is yoga? Rajvi?
See, yoga is an ancient Indian science, philosophy, art, whatever you call it. It dates back to nearly 4th to 2nd century BC and possibly older, but it's penned down in the Yoga Sutras.
So I know a bunch of my friends who practice yoga. Everyone does slightly different things. They all do different types of yoga. Some people do it in hot rooms. What's complicated for science then is how does the scientific community go about studying yoga? Holger, can you add something in here?
Surprisingly, there seems to be no clear definition of what yoga is. And I think this mainly comes from the different perspectives people bring into yoga research. So there are many yoga researchers who are practitioners themselves, so they have their own experience with yoga. But there are also, for example, exercise scientists. And when exercise scientists do a yoga study, a yoga trial, they of course do it from an exercise perspective. And so they often reduce it to exercise, perhaps with a bit of relaxation in it. And just a few years ago, there were still articles and studies published on yoga that just said, okay, we have patients with a lung disease and we teach them yoga for a week. And there is no further information with what they mean, what yoga is. And I think this is one of the difficulties, especially when you look at yoga as a therapy, that we don't have a clear consensus of what yoga is, but no one is aware of, because everybody brings their own perspective as an exercise scientist, as a psychologist, or from any other discipline. And so there is hardly any dialogue of what yoga actually is.
Richie, when did science first start trying to apply a scientific method to something that people have done for thousands of years?
The first scientific publications on yoga were probably around the 1970s. There's been a distinct increase in scientific research in this area over the last 15 or 20 years. And ideally, what we want to do in scientific research is do longitudinal research where we can teach people a specific practice and then look at changes over time. And in that way, we can be more certain that the changes we see are somehow tied to the specific practices that we've taught them. Of course, there it's essential that the right kind of control groups are in place. And yoga and meditation are very different than doing research on a pharmaceutical where you can give a person a placebo. You can't easily have a person practice placebo yoga or placebo meditation.
I was going to ask Holger about this. Yeah. What exactly is a control group in yoga? What would that even begin to look like?
Yeah, so this is one of the most difficult questions in yoga research. I totally agree with Richard here. So it's very important to look on that. And there have been approaches to design something like a yoga placebo, but I don't think any of those were really effective. So there has been a trial, for example, on yoga for asthma, and they reduced yoga so long and so strictly until they could come up with a placebo. So they invented a yoga breathing device that mimicked yoga breathing, and they could produce a placebo device that did not mimic this yoga breathing, and they called it a yoga versus placebo trial. But I think we all agree that this has nothing to do with what yoga is all about.
I'm going to bring Rajvi in with a controversial point, which is there are millions of people who are very happy to do yoga who probably don't give two hoots about what the scientific evidence is to justify its benefits. So even though we're a science show, and even though our listener wants to know exactly what the claims are that she's being told about, does science even need to get involved, do you think?
Here you are dealing with human subjects who are again exposed to a subjective practice. Whatever we do, yoga is a very subjective practice as much as we try to standardize it, So even if I'm saying I'm going to get people to do, say, a Marichasana, a group of people who have a back pain to do a twisting asana, but it's still going to be extremely variable again in the group of people. So we are dealing with a lot of variability and the control. So it's time we try to understand that different researches need to be looked at differently. There was a researcher who wanted to study the effect of Shirshasana, the headstand. And, that point of time, the mindset was you did research in animal models. So he put a rat upside down in a test tube. Thinking of it today, it sounds ridiculous. I think it's very important now to come with evidence because anything comes under the name of yoga. Today, yoga is so popular that you move your hand a bit, it's called yoga. You give it some name, you move your leg, and everybody has their own perception of yoga. It's like the blind men describing an elephant. I think it's extremely important if you want to offer it as a therapeutic science in this world of evidence-based medicine. We need to provide evidence and we need to be very clear on the practices that are being given and the tradition that is being used. Because, otherwise it's saying I am giving people medicine and they are feeling better. I mean, what medicine, what dose, how frequently, what exactly, and the most important aspect is the quality. Because in medicine, you have the FDA taking care of the quality of the drugs. But in yoga, if you are practicing and there's no quality, you may not get the effects. And therefore, you'll always get variability.
Thank you. So just a reminder that you're listening to Crowd Science on the BBC World Service, which is the show that takes the thing you've always wondered about and turns it into your own personalised science documentary. You are very welcome. This week, we're exploring the evidence base behind yoga with Dr. Rajvi Mehta in India, Dr. Richie Davidson in the US and Professor Holger Kramer in Germany. Panel, we've just talked about the difficulty in defining what yoga even is and setting up a decent, thorough experiment to find out who it might benefit. So let's talk about benefits in more details. And first, let's hear from some yoga fans in India to hear what they get from this.
Over the last 1.5, 2 months, I've definitely seen a bit of a weight loss, which shouldn't have happened because it's the festive season.
When I used to get up, I used to just have cold in the morning, like sneeze or have cold, a little bit of cold. So that just got away on its own only. I didn't even realize that.
I always had a blocked nose for a long, long time. And for some reason, I don't have those allergies or the nose blocking anymore. And the flexibility of the body. I was more of a gym guy, but doing yoga now for 2 months, I can touch my toes without any issues. I can move my body around, much more flexibility.
And I joined yoga because I was very new to the city and entire day I was in front of the screen. So instead of doing anything else, because I somewhere knew that yoga helps you bloom mentally.
I was really active before here. I was doing gym, so I was very active throughout the day. And but after doing yoga, I realized that no need of gymming and all that. Yoga is something else. I just feel complete doing it. I just don't need any kind of. I've stopped doing gym and all. So I just do yoga. Yeah, gym is only for the physical fitness, right? But yoga is something else. It's beyond even imagination.
Beyond imagination sounds very impressive. So at this point, I want you to show me the evidence. What are the clearest studies showing physical benefits from yoga? Holger.
I think the best evidence we have actually is for chronic low back pain. So there have been many trials in this field, and the trials that are out there, at least most of them, are very high quality. And this includes, as has been said before, clearly outlining what had been done and following all their scientific rules. And there are relatively large and relatively many trials on chronic low back pain. And the evidence clearly shows that yoga can reduce pain. It can improve function. You're not only feeling pain when you have low back pain, but the function is also impaired, and increase quality of life. Another field where we have quite really good research and good evidence is supportive cancer care. So, of course, you don't try to cure cancer by yoga. This is important. You don't use yoga against the cancer. But when you treat cancer with surgery, with chemotherapy, with radiation, for example, you always have quite severe side effects. And one of those side effects, the most important one perhaps, is fatigue. So people who are undergoing chemotherapy, they feel exhausted. And it has been shown that yoga is the single best non-pharmaceutical approach to deal with cancer-related fatigue. So this is really impressive evidence.
I think it's interesting that we're homing in on pain and fatigue, because Richie, I'd like to bring you in at this point, because when I was thinking about how to unpick this, I took physical benefits and then psychological benefits, and I started putting them in separate buckets. And then I thought, this is an artificial distinction, isn't it? Because the mind is part of the body.
Yeah, and I think pain is a great example of where those two are inextricably intertwined. And there is an increasing body of basic neuroscience evidence that helps us understand how techniques like yoga help to modulate pain. And in a kind of simple way, we can say that there are at least two major constituents of pain. One is the sensory qualities of the pain that is produced by whatever the stimulus is that is eliciting the pain. And then there is the emotional component of pain. And it turns out that the brain networks that are associated with each of those components is different and is dissociable. And we know that yoga and meditation can have profound impact, particularly on the emotional neural circuits that are associated with pain. And through that, it can dramatically reduce the distress that the pain might be producing. So a person may notice.
So you're still getting the pain.
You're still getting
the pain, but you're reacting to it differently.
Exactly. This is something extremely important, and can really, I think, be of tremendous benefit in decreasing the need for certain kinds of more invasive interventions and improving the quality of life for many patients.
Now, maybe we should rejoin my yoga session to hear more of those claims. At this point, I'm bent over with my head pressed to my knees.
It's talking about bringing fresh blood to the head. But yeah, I'm not sure whether bending over does that.
So this is the sort of thing our listener Margaret is wondering about as she does her yoga and hears claims like this mentioned. In her case, she's heard that certain poses aid with digestion or that they flush out toxins. Rajvi, as a yoga teacher and scientist, have you come across any claims that, I don't know, you think, oh, where did that come from?
To some extent, of course, it turns out that if I'm a teacher and I want to get students and it's a commercial aspect, then I will make claims. So some things, yes, I mean, if you feel an extension in the leg, that's immediate. But to feel silence in the brain, etc., it comes over a period of time. So as a practitioner, as a teacher, if I feel that, then I need to develop ways and means to transmit that to the students and then see if they get it. Not enforce them to tell me, yes, they feel it.
Can I ask you about long-term versus short-term benefits? Olga, are there any studies that really look into the benefits of yoga over, I don't know, multiple decades?
There is interesting research, for example, into age-related cognitive decline. So we have to face the truth. We're all getting older, and with increasing age, our cognitive functions decline. And when you compare meditators or yoga practitioners to those people who are not doing yoga or meditation, then you see less decline. So they have a better memory, a better learning capacity, a better fluent intelligence. This is learning capacity for new things. And they are much better in those things than matched controls in the same age. Perhaps they are even better than younger controls. So this is not clear causal evidence. We can't say this is caused by yoga, that you reduce age-related decline. But at least it's an association and an interesting hint that you might perhaps not live longer, but live better in higher age.
With regard to the question of longer-term effects, I think that this is a really important issue. Several years ago, I wrote a book with my colleague Daniel Goleman called Altered Traits. And the reason why we chose altered traits is because when we do a session of yoga or a session of meditation, the primary goal is not the feeling we have at the moment during the session, but rather is how does it impact our everyday life? How does it affect every nook and cranny of our everyday lives? If all that happened was just when we're on the mat or on the cushion, it would be like taking a drug. And then once the drug wears off, we'd be back down to baseline. And of course, that's not what this is about. What we're interested in is cultivating altered traits. That is, qualities that endure. We are teaching people simple skills that they can bring into their everyday life on a regular basis, and that this will be a lifelong practice. When human beings first evolved, none of us were brushing our teeth. And somehow every human being pretty much on the planet has learned how to brush their teeth. And it's not part of our genome. We figured out how to do that because it's important for our personal physical hygiene. And what we're talking about is something important for our personal mental hygiene.
So if I can just summarize here, because we're talking quite generally still about behaviors that we have learnt, that we have adopted through yoga that appear to be good for us. But our listener, Margaret, who started all of this off with her quest, I suppose I wanted to know how science has studied yoga, but she wanted to know the kind of extra level of granularity of certain claims for certain poses within the yoga that she does. So, it aids your digestion and it flushes out the toxins. It feels like on that level, that's not something that science has been looking at. And in fact, I'm not even sure what toxins actually refers to. Is that right?
There is clear evidence showing that, for example, yoga helps dealing with digestive diseases. For example, when you look at irritable bowel syndrome. And when you practice yoga, and this has been shown in clinical trials, you can clearly reduce the level of symptoms people with irritable bowel syndrome have. And it's as effective as a diet that is specifically designed for irritable bowel syndrome. So there are clear effects on digestion, even with inflammatory bowel disease. So these are really serious illnesses of the digestive systems. And you can reduce inflammation in the bowel by practicing yoga. You can reduce symptoms and diarrhea and pain. So you definitely can affect the digestive system. Regarding toxins, I think this is a bit of a misconceptualization because the idea of detox is not really backed up by good science. So we don't pile up toxins in our body. So when you're really intoxicated, you don't need a yoga teacher, you need an ambulance because this is a life-threatening state you have.
Can I just ask, if we're summarizing, is there any proof that yoga has special powers above just stretching or above just doing breathing exercises? Is it true that it's greater than the sum of its parts if you break those parts down? And is that something that science has shown yet? Can I get that in kind of very short answer from any of you?
There is no modern evidence to show it, so we do not know. But at that point of time, even what we are talking of now, the benefits, which is there's a lot of evidence, was not known in terms of science 50, 100 years ago. So I wouldn't want to comment on it and say whether it's going to happen or not happen because we don't even know how to check on it.
I would say that it's one of the things that you learn in science is how to cultivate patience. Science is a slow process. There's a lot of hype regarding meditation and yoga. A lot of that hype, I think, has not served well because the evidence right now is still at a very, very early stage. And I would say we don't really have the evidence to show that it is greater than the sum of its parts for the most part. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to investigate because we're still at a very, very early stage in this work.
Yeah, one thing I personally find fascinating about yoga is that it is in itself, from a therapeutic perspective, a multimodal approach. So to really reduce yoga to exercise is strongly reductionistic. So it has been shown that the breathing exercises have their own effects on the nervous system. Of course, meditation is a complete field of research showing many benefits. And yoga has exercise and beyond that, even ethical and lifestyle advice. So I agree that we don't clearly have the evidence, at least not for most conditions we study, but there is a good chance that yoga could be more than just its parts because it's a unique combination of different approaches to almost all aspects of our lives.
Panel, thank you so much. That was great. I will let you go. That's all we've got time for in this edition of Crowd Science.